Resolution 14-06-03-09 in the matter of opposing the indefinite detention provisions of the National Defense Authorization Act. Today we have Mr. Kyler, our Intergovernmental Relations Manager, to discuss this. Mr. Kyler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Commissioners, Alex Kyler, your Intergovernmental Relations Manager, here today to talk about sort of continuation of the conversation that we've had several times in front of the board with respect to the National Defense Authorization Act. You do have two packets in front of you related that are somewhat related. The first is the order and resolution opposing certain sections of the 2012 National Defense Authorization Act. This item has been brought to you by several different stakeholder groups that exist in the community, and indeed some of them are active nationally. I think, as been pointed out before, this issue sort of spans both sides of the political spectrum, with groups as diverse as on the one side, the American Civil Liberties Union, to a group called Oath Keepers, which is more sort of ex-military folks. There's the background here is that in 2012, when the National Defense Authorization Act was taken up, and it's an annual authorization bill for the United States military departments, there was some language inserted that allowed for the detention, arrest and detention of people who were deemed to be aiding and abetting in terrorist activities. And the language in that bill was interpreted to include United States citizens. There's been an effort by these grassroots organizations to get local governments to pass ordinances such as the one that you have in front of you. And we modeled this one after a resolution that was passed by the city of San Francisco just over a year ago in March of 2013. You'll recall that we actually had a very well-attended public hearing on this issue back on April 15th, and there were probably 300 people sitting behind me in the room, and many of them expressed their opinion to you about their level of discomfort with this federal law. I think there's been a couple things that are pertinent that have happened. Early on in this discussion, we heard about a United States Circuit Court that had found sections 1021 and 1022 of the 2012 Act unconstitutional. That action was that lower court's action was overturned by a higher court subsequently, and the plaintiffs in that court then asked the Supreme Court to intervene, and on March 28th, the U.S. Supreme Court declined to intervene to hear that case. So the appeals court ruling stands. Nonetheless, you did direct us to bring forward a strong resolution, and we found the city of San Francisco's to be probably the most appropriate in terms of the various resolutions and orders that we've looked at that have been passed from around the nation. And so it is before you as the order that you listed, Mr. Chair. You'll see the series of whereases that explain sort of the story of the NDAA, and then the resolution goes on to affirm your commitment to the Constitution. I want to bring a special attention to item number 2 in what you're finding, and that is the direction again that you provided during the after the April 15th hearing in terms of limiting public resources that might be utilized to assist federal agencies that may actually act to implement those sections of the law should they should they come to fruition. And then finally, you direct staff to forward this resolution, if approved, to a variety of federal agencies, federal committees, and to our United States federal delegation. So I think that is the summary that I have for you, Mr. Chair and Commissioners, and if there's any questions, I'm happy to address them.
Thank you, Mr. Kyler. Questions or comments? Commissioner Lycan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I know I was out of town during the public hearing and I wasn't able to attend, but I did view it. And it's actually a fairly long, extensive viewing, I noticed. So a couple of questions I have, really one, and that is with this proposed resolution, this affects only Lane County. And due to the fact that the other cities in our jurisdiction are also home rule charter, they're not involved. So maybe this is for Mr. Dingle. So is that do I have that? Is that correct?
Chair for Commissioner Lycan, that's correct.
So this resolution basically affects about 22% of Lane County in a sense, I guess population-wise. Now, granted, I'm guessing that situation that may potentially occur in rural Lane County more so than maybe the urban core, but I just want to make sure to clarify that the other cities also have home rule charter as well, and until they pass a similar resolution, they will not be affected by this county resolution. Is that correct?
Chair for Commissioner Lycan, that's correct.
Okay. I thought it was important just to note. It's just not that I have a strong opinion one way or another on that, but also that the Lane County resolution, as we are a very large county, we do have to understand that about 78% of our population does live within an urban core, urban center of some sort, whether it be Eugene, Springfield, or other incorporated cities, and they would not be affected by this. So that's really the only question I had as far as the resolution itself. I know this gained a lot of emotion. I actually was somewhat surprised that this was coming up, and after the public testimony that we're here at a Marlins game again, and that I actually expected folks from the organization to be here this morning. So I was kind of taken aback to walk in and not see anybody here this morning. So somewhat surprised, but also given the, I thought it was interesting on what you mentioned on the as far as the U.S. Supreme Court's concerned. It looks like that it really is going to take an act of Congress, and it looks like they were trying to take this up not too long ago, but it got watered down, and which caused our delegation to vote no on something they wanted to support. But am I correct on that? And I believe it was watered down by Senator Reid, is what it looked like. But is that correct?
Well, Commissioner Lycan, the answer to your question is that the NDAA is a bill that is taken up annually by Congress, and the issue was that there were some amendments. In fact, there was an amendment that would have stripped this language from 2012 out of the bill, and you're correct. Senator Reid, President of the Senate, decided that there would be no amendments heard on the floor through rule, and that did spark some debate. But this, like I said, this is an annual bill. As you recall, we had written a letter to the Oregon senators asking them to work on stripping this language out. They subsequently voted against the bill, and they have pretty consistently voted against the bill. But there is a lot of other policies and projects within that bill. Typically, our understanding was that their no votes were not necessarily tied to the letter that we provided.
So, and again, it just seems that our federal delegation is very strongly, in a sense, supportive of basically what we're asking them to do. It's just that unfortunately they seem to be in the minority and on in both houses at this point in time. So I guess only time will tell on that. And then I guess based on, and this is speculation right now, but based on the Second Circuit Court of Appeals choosing or they overturned this district, but then the Supreme Court chose not to hear this. I would be asking you to speculate if you felt like that this is something that they maybe are looking at in the future. I didn't read anything on that, so it just sounded like to me they just said the answer is no, we're not going to hear it, and I wish you the best. Is that interpretation correct?
Chairman Farr and Commissioner Lycan, I think the issue is that in order for there to be a case that gets heard in front of the state Supreme Court, there has to be standing. And in this particular case, the Supreme Court observed that nobody has actually been injured by this law. So there was sort of this speculation that was being proposed that indeed, especially reporters could get sort of tied up in those provisions inadvertently. In their opinion, and the court found that there was not sufficient standing because indeed nobody has gotten tied up into the provisions of this law to date. I think I've got that accurate.
Chair Farr, Commissioner Lycan, yes, the court, part of the standing doctrine is that they only decide actual controversies between parties, and so when you bring a case, there has to be some sort of injury. A good example are taxpayer lawsuits where they require that the individual bringing the lawsuit, for example, complaining about some aspect of spending, show that they were harmed in a specific or a different way. So that was really the ruling of the Second Circuit, and the Supreme Court left that undisturbed because, quite frankly, it was pretty well settled case law and standing.
Okay, that's all the questions I had. I appreciate that. Governments many times do what we call, in a sense, symbolism over substance, and unfortunately, I think that's where we're getting to, and based on where the Supreme Court is. But I also believe that it's important that local governments can send messages, and clearly our federal delegation seems to be on the same page that we are, and so I don't think we're out of line really on the resolution itself. So thank you very much.
And thank you, Commissioner Lycan, for getting your questions out. You weren't at the public hearing, but I do know that you poured over the statements. The public hearing that we had on April 15th was highly attended, and we allowed Mr. Osborne, who's the spokesperson for PANDA, to make a presentation longer than the normal public testimony. But we also had Charlie Swanson from the chair of Democratic Party Lane County, and Becky Lemler, who was Republican candidate for state rep some time ago. So we have pretty broad interest in this. We also have pretty broad geographic interest, including Leslie Rubenstein from Cottage Grove and Jack Dresser from Mackenzie Bridge. So it's deep and wide, the interest in this particular issue. Further discussion? Commissioner Stewart.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. And thank you, Mr. Kyler. This resolution reflects, I believe, what my understanding was when we finished our work session on public hearing. I'm pleased that it's fairly clean and easy to read, and it's also straight to the point. It covers our concerns with potential constitutional violations that could potentially occur under the provisions of 1021 and 1022. And it also talks about, it's nice to see that it included in this specific item, which I thought we would take up in the ordinance specifically, that we would not provide any financial assistance to the federal government if they violate the constitutional rights under this act of individuals. So, and it also is directed to our senators and congressmen at the federal level. So I believe this is what my understanding was at the end of the meeting, and hopefully what the citizens expected at the conclusion also.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Chairman Farr and Commissioner Stewart, and yes, you're right. The board did direct to, and we sort of landed on that question of how to or whether to allocate resources based on testimony that was provided that evening. There was a gentleman that stood up and sort of floated that concept, and I think there were a number of us who landed on it as a potential vehicle. I think as you'll see, you make this statement in the resolution. As we get into the conversation about the ordinance and indeed in how to sort of codify that statement, there may be some challenges that come to light in terms of how you actually can do that piece. So that'll be sort of the topic of the next.
Yeah, and I just say that I have some major concerns with the next item. I just want to focus on this one, and pleased that you're able to include it. And I wanted to say to Commissioner Mike, and I understand that we don't have any jurisdiction inside the city limits, but for most of us, we operate the jail where these people will be housed. So it's quite possible that even a city resident that could be impacted by this would, if we would allow it to take place, could be impacted by it. So, hopefully this is assuring our citizens that, we do believe in our constitutional rights, and that we're trying to recognize that and uphold their protections. So, the one item, if I might, and I think it was included, and maybe it's been discussed, Mr. Kyler, but there was also a question about could we send this to our state representatives and our governor's office. Did you have that thought when you performed this or prepared this? Provided that you did.
Chairman Farr and Commissioner Stewart, you'll note in the packet there is a discussion about that topic of nullification. We did discuss nullification some at the last meeting, and there's, at least in my observation, we've seen some bills in the Oregon legislature that have attempted to nullify federal laws that have not advanced, not even been heard. So they've been really more symbolic than anything. I think the folks who came to the Board of County Commissioners and asked for this request are certainly able to contact their state representative or their state senator and see if they could get a bill introduced. That's always an option for any Oregonian, and I didn't put it in here. Just that we've got a fairly robust legislative agenda in front of us that will be coming to legislative committee and ultimately to the board soon. But there's quite a bit of stuff on that list, and it's growing in terms of other issues for 2015.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Stewart, Mr. Kyler. And point out that we do have two items before us today. One is the order that we're discussing right now, and we will also follow that with a discussion on a potential ordinance that will be no action taken today. One thing I'll point out, I recently visited Charlottesville, Virginia, and in Virginia, the cities are not a part of the county. So Charlottesville, although it's surrounded by Albemarle County, is not a part of Albemarle County. Eugene is, last I heard, in Lane County. So things that happen in Eugene are happening in Lane County. Unlike Charlottesville, things that happen in Charlottesville aren't happening in Albemarle County. Further discussion? Commissioner Rosenberg.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Kyler, for bringing forward this resolution. I think it kind of is a nice way of wrapping this whole thing up. I have one change to the actual wording of the resolution that I'd like to propose if we are going to move this forward. In the first whereas, it talks about on the basis of our representative democracy. That word should be republic, and that's a very important distinction. A republic functions under the rule of law, and I think part of this whole issue is about functioning under the rule of law. So that's the only change I have to that, to your resolution, is in that first whereas. The Constitution of the United States and the Oregon Constitution are the basis of our representative republic and reflects protections that no other person will be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law.
Since we don't have a motion yet,
but I'm just
when the time comes in.
When I come, but I just want to bring that forward right now so people understand that. If there are any questions about that, that can be asked. But I think that's an extremely important distinction, because if we're a pure democracy, there is no rule of law.
And should that friendly amendment arise, I'll look to our parliamentarian for an opinion on it. So,
okay. And then Commissioner Stewart already pointed this out. We are the
purveyors of jail services for the entire county, including the cities. So this does have a lot of importance, as well as our elected sheriff is the highest law enforcement officer for Lane County. There is no other elected chief law enforcement officer in Lane County. All the police chiefs are appointed, not elected. It's the only real representative of the people for enforcement of law in this county. So I think it's, having a county resolution about this particular issue is really important, and is basically saying that we as the board were sworn to uphold the Oregon Constitution and the U.S. Constitution, are saying to the Congress, you need to fix this, and if you don't fix it, we won't assist you in violating our citizens' rights. And I think that's a really important thing for us to say as a board of commissioners, as the elected representatives of our folks, and that we will protect their rights, even if it's against our federal government.
Thank you, Commissioner. They should point out furthermore that the police chiefs are not appointed by an elected body. They're appointed by a hired city manager or city administrator.
Right.
Thank you. Further discussion, Commissioner Swanson.
I wanted to ask Mr. Kyler, did you send these resolutions to Mr. Osmond and the other groups or the people that were making presentations, or is your knowledge that they learned about this through putting it on the website and the way the general public learns about these our board meetings?
Chairman Farr and Commissioner Sorensen, I've had no direct conversations with Mr.
I specifically sent it to Mr. Osmond, and then I did not hear comment back.
Okay, good. And then the other thing I was going to ask is, I think Commissioner Stewart asked, would it be going to the state legislators? And I think, obviously, it should be going to the federal legislators, too. Is that part of it? It's addressed to them, or?
Commissioner Farr and Chairman Farr, Commissioner Sorensen, I think we did put that, yes, that this goes to the, we'll send copies, if you approve this resolution, to each of the Lane County delegation to Congress.
Okay, good.
I'll be the sole signature on this, so that'll be coming from my office, I suspect, that it'll be going to the elected bodies.
Yeah, I think it's really important that we recognize several things about this. One is that our congressional delegation, Senator Merkley, Senator Wyden, Congressman DeFazio, they have been against including this amendment from the beginning. They've been opposed to it all along. Number two, that the decision by the Second Circuit and the Supreme Court of the United States about all of this really is on grounds that there hasn't been any American incarcerated, and therefore there's no case or controversy. And as Mr. Jingle pointed out, you have to have a case or a controversy, and has a very specific meaning in our federal law. Our republic has the idea that our federal courts should be limited courts, and most things should be in our state courts, and most things are in our state courts. But for those limited items in federal court, that's been active case or controversy. So there hasn't been any Americans incarcerated under this law, and the president in his signing statement said he wouldn't allow that. The good news is there's no case or controversy. The bad news is we don't have a ruling that this is unconstitutional, except by a district court. And so I think it's really important that we continue to thank our congressional delegation for all the work they're putting into this. I think they've made it pretty clear that they do favor the annual appropriation, Defense Authorization Act, and the annual defense appropriation, but they don't favor what they consider to be, what I agree, them is an unconstitutional provision in the law. And so getting it out legislatively, I think, is the best, approach. And I think that our resolution should contain that. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Sorensen. We are coming up on a time certain in about 6 minutes. We can continue the discussion or we can carry this beyond. We do have a numbered resolution to consider. At this point, I could request a motion. Commissioner Bozovich?
So I'd like to move approval of, I want to get the board order number correct, Order and Resolution 14-0603-09 in the matter of opposing the indefinite detention provisions of the National Defense Authorization Act with one minor amendment, which is to strike the word democracy in the first whereas and replace it with the word republic.
We have a motion.
Second.
Moved in second with the minor amendment, and to Mr. Dingle, that amendment applies.
There's nothing, Chair Fox, excuse me, that's proper.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much. And then I'll go ahead and read the resolution. No, I won't. But the resolution is available on our website, once again, through the procedure that I outlined earlier, www.lanecounty.org. Go to agendas and click here, and you'll get the entire resolution. So we have a motion and a second discussion to the motion. Commissioner Lycan.
So I'd just like to make one quick comment. That is, as the longest serving mayor in the history of the city of Springfield, I will tell you there was always an advice and consent component in every single department head ever hired by the city that was eventually hired by the city manager. So while the police chief is appointed by the city manager, the council basically had to give their blessing beforehand. And so there's no disrespect to a publicly elected sheriff or anything else, but there's a lot more moving parts than just an appointment and moving on. And just wanted to make sure that was clarified here in the comments beforehand. So, yeah, thank you for that.
Wasn't trying to disparage that.
All right. Further discussion. Commissioner Sorensen.
I also think that this resolution is improved by the word republic, because there's a lot of things in our country that are not particularly democratic, not necessarily democratic. That Delaware gets the same number of votes in the U.S. Senate as Oregon when we are much bigger in land area and population. That doesn't seem very democratic. Doesn't seem very democratic that federal judges get to be in their job for a lifetime, even if some of them only do half a lifetime's work, or maybe that doesn't seem very fair. Doesn't necessarily seem very fair and democratic sometimes that people that actually pick the president are the electors, not the actual voters. The voters only pick the electors. And so there's a lot of things where we have a republic and not a democracy, and sometimes I think Americans do misunderstand that although the basis of our republic is a lot of democracy, there's a lot of elements that aren't very democratic. The First Amendment isn't very democratic. There's no vote on whether you have a right to have your own religion or criticize the government. That's not something that's subject to democracy or majority rule. That's something you have a right to under our republic. So I think it is a good improvement.
Thank you, Commissioner Sorensen. And thanks, Commissioner Lycan, for pointing out that police chiefs do go through a rigorous process before they're appointed. But by the time Len Cook's name and by the time Jim Hill's name came before then Councilor Lowy and I, we weren't about to disagree with Mike Gleason at the time. So we have a motion and a second. Those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? None. Passes unanimously. The order will be signed later today. Thank you very much.